Thanks, Kelly, and welcome everybody to our webinar today, What to Expect When You're Requesting. And so as our nation's retirement plans have gained increasing attention from regulators, I'm sure that a lot of you heard about the DOL ruling that was issued just last month about expanding the fiduciary standard. We're getting a lot more attention from regulators for retirement plans, and it's important for plan sponsors to document the due diligence they perform for their plans, of course. While this due diligence a lot of times takes the form of fee benchmarking, various types of plan reporting, an effective evaluation for those providing advisory services to retirement plans has really proved elusive. During this webinar, I'm going to walk through a simple questionnaire that you can use to document your evaluation of a current or prospective advisor for your plan. The questions that are in this questionnaire will cover the broad range of topics that really provide that effective due diligence for investment advisors, and will also help you provide the due diligence that's required under the new fiduciary ruling issued by the Department of Labor. I'm going to cover the answers that you should really be looking for and the logic behind the direction of the questions included as a part of that tool. We'll have some links that we'll get out to everybody after the webinar is over where you can go to download the questionnaire. It is not branded or anything with SWBC. It's really meant to be an easy, effective tool for you to use in your practice and to really walk away from this webinar with actionable solutions that you can implement quickly. Before we get started, we're actually going to put a poll out for everybody to take a look and provide us with a little bit of feedback about why you're attending today's webinar. Basically, there's 4 answers. Either you're completing an investment advisor RFP within the next 6 months, within the next 6 to 12 months, at some point beyond the next 12 months, or really if you're just looking to gather general due diligence as a result of the DOL ruling. We found that a lot of folks really are very interested in the new DOL ruling and understanding how do they provide due diligence. And again, the questionnaires and the RFP document that we're going to send you links for to be able to download will really help you understand how to do that due diligence, how to get information. It doesn't go through all the specific regulations or anything of the new DOL ruling, but the results of those questionnaires that you would get back from advisors will help you in terms of being able to see just what you're looking for, are they a fiduciary, and all the things that we're going to cover as we go through today's webinar. As we look through the results here that are up on everybody's screen, it looks like it's about a 50-50 split. About half of you are here looking to potentially do an RFP over the next 12 months or a little bit beyond 12 months for some of you. And then about half of you are here just to get some general due diligence, really bone up on how to go out and see exactly what are your investment advisors doing. So with that, we'll take the poll off the screen there, and we'll go ahead and move right into the rest of our presentation today. So a lot of times there's very predictable questions whenever you're out doing an evaluation of an investment advisor. Things that are very easy to ask would be things like, obviously, what is your fee? How do you get paid? Which is a very different question from what is your fee? Are you a fiduciary to our plan? What funds do you use? And then how often are we going to see you? Those are all very predictable questions, and a lot of the questions that you'll see in the questionnaire we'll send everybody is they're very predictable questions. They'll have these kind of questions out there. But what we're going to go through today is that sometimes the answers that you get from those questions tell you a little bit more than you would think. So questions like, do you have ERISA insurance? Well, that's a very easy question to say, do you have insurance? But the reason that we ask that question and the answers that we're looking for from advisors when we ask those questions sometimes goes in a different direction than what you would expect. So thoroughly understanding the role of your investment advisor is an essential component of the risk management strategy for your plan. I think that kind of goes without saying, but as I said during the description of the webinar, most plan sponsors view risk management through the lens of benchmarking their record keeper or TPA. The investment advisor is usually seen as that kind of go-between or that advocate for your plan. And so when we ask our plan sponsors, what do you consider to be a successful investment advisor? The overwhelming majority answer with some version of the idea of good investment performance. For retirement plans, this is someone providing a report on the investment performance and maybe doing a fund change once in a while. And now, performance is, of course, very important. Everybody wants to get good investment performance. Nobody wants to have a menu of investments for their retirement plan that's consistently underperforming. But as a plan sponsor, this is not the entirety of the benefits a retirement plan advisor should be providing. The main reason that you want to hire a retirement plan investment advisor is ultimately risk management. You're hiring a prudent expert to perform a service that is not a core competency of your organization's retirement plan committee. When it comes to risk management, the DOL doesn't care about performance. All of these new regulations that have come out recently, none of it has to do specifically with investment performance. They care about the process. The process, the process, the process. How did you get to where you are today, and why? If you have a good process in place, the performance will certainly follow, but they want to see the steps that were taken. Exactly how did you get to where you are today? So how do you evaluate that process in risk management? There are a lot of underlying points that can help strengthen your documentation and understanding of the services an advisor can provide to your plan as part of being your prudent expert. So beginning at the end, these points up here are the conclusion that I hope to bring everyone to as we progress through this presentation. It's very important to ask your advisor to provide due diligence information to your retirement plan committee annually. The DOL has started requesting these types of information during the initial stages of an audit, the purpose of which is to confirm plan sponsors are conducting that ongoing due diligence of their vendors and to ensure the appropriateness and suitability of those relationships. The new regulations that have come out only strengthen that position. This has been something that's been coming along for a long time now, but getting that due diligence, requesting that information, if you're being audited, if there's ever litigation that's coming your way, having that due diligence already in place is going to be critical for you to be able to show, yes, we are in fact doing the right thing, making sure our advisor is doing the right thing for us. That information should document all aspects of the relationship and provide you with critical documents that you can keep in your compliance files internally. Much like we as investment advisors have rules that dictate the retention of our records, communications, marketing, all the aspects of our practices, it's important that you establish internally a procedure for documenting the relationship with your advisor for your own internal compliance files. The recent DOL ruling on expanding the fiduciary standard, again, it only underscores the need to ensure that you're performing that required due diligence. So again, the issues that I'm going to be discussing today, it follows the course of that questionnaire that we'll send everyone a link to be able to go in and easily download electronically. And the questionnaire, again, is not branded with our name. It's intended to provide you with an immediate, simple, efficient way to perform due diligence. Nearly all of the questions that you'll see on that questionnaire are presented in a yes or no format. There's radial buttons for the advisor to be able to provide their response with an easy click. There are a couple of questions where there is more than a yes or no response required, such as what's the advisor's fee structure. And where those spaces are provided, there's a very limited amount of space to provide the requested answer. If you ask very open-ended questions of advisors or really anyone in the advisor or retirement plan industry, they can provide you with a long, kind of rambling answer. And the point of these questionnaires is just get to the point. Tell us what, in fact, you make. How do you get paid? Those types of things. Again, the goal is to make the process as easy as possible to determine the services you're receiving and evaluate if you, in fact, do need to take action. So the first step in performing due diligence is to ensure that you fully understand the scope of services that you're getting now from your advisor. If you have a current advisor for your plan, it's important to say just what does this person in fact do for us? The primary objective should be to determine if they're performing duties that would deem them to be a fiduciary as defined by ERISA. This includes confirmation that basic rules are in place for selecting, monitoring, replacing investment options as needed, and those are of course put forth in your planned investment policy statement, or most commonly referred to as an IPS. Despite all of the regulations that we have in the retirement industry, the investment policy statement is still not a legally required document. Kind of a staggering fact to me that we haven't gotten to the point where it is in fact legally required. But if you are ever in a situation where you're audited, or if you're in a situation where you're being challenged in terms of litigation or something like that from a participant, the investment policy statement is one of the very first things that they're going to ask you for. It again has all those pieces to say, how do you select, monitor, and replace investment options? So ensuring that you not only have an investment policy in place, but that your advisor is reviewing that document and updating it on an ongoing basis is a critical fact. In conjunction with the IPS, evaluate if your advisor is providing you specific investment recommendations in writing. Getting them in writing is very, very important so that you can reference this objective opinion in your committee minutes. Never reword what your advisor is saying or try to interpret written opinions from your advisor, because when you do that, it can really shift that responsibility back onto you as a plan sponsor. And I'll say here too, getting the specific recommendation in writing is critical, because a lot of times you're going to get a lot of information from your providers that really is just investment reporting. Investment reporting is not advice. If they send you a list saying, here's the performance and the rankings of all of your investment options, well, clearly you can see that Fund A is not doing well because it's in the 80th percentile over the last 3 and 5 years. Well, that's still not advice. If they don't specifically tell you Fund A needs to be removed, we're recommending that you remove it and replace it with Fund B. That is a fiduciary act, simply providing you with reporting and saying, well, Fund A obviously doesn't look very good. You can sort of see that in the report. Here's a bunch of options that we have in that same category. You know, it's up to you now. Off you go. So again, that is not, in fact, advice. That's not tripping that wire and being a fiduciary. That's simply reporting to you. And getting caught up in that line between the two can sometimes be, again, very confusing for plan sponsors. Finally, look and see if your advisor is providing any type of participant education, if they're providing model portfolios. All of these types of things that I'm talking about, specific advice and going through and getting you recommendations in writing, all of these items are going to deem your advisor to be a fiduciary. Because, after all, if your advisor doesn't provide services that would deem them to be a fiduciary, why would you pay them to be your investment advisor? And again, the days where fiduciary status is determined solely by the advisor's willingness to accept the title of a fiduciary are gone. Fiduciary status is now determined by those services we just covered, whereby an advisor will be deemed a fiduciary simply by providing the services a plan sponsor should expect from their retirement plan advisor. Simply being a fiduciary is no longer the differentiating factor, but it's important that you have an understood, documented relationship with your advisor. The new regulations that have come out, there's a lot of ways that you can, in certain situations, try to get around. You can get through these contract exemptions and things like that that can avoid putting someone in a fiduciary light, but you just have to kind of ask yourself, you know, why would we do that? If someone is trying to get around a rule that is really created to be in our best interest and to protect retirement plan sponsors and retirement plan participants, why would we want to take advantage of that? There are a lot of RIAs out there, registered investment advisors, and retirement plan advisors in general that are very willing to take on that fiduciary role to give you specific recommendations and to take some of that fiduciary load off your shoulders. You can never eliminate your fiduciary responsibility. But again, you can certainly fulfill it by inviting other people into the boat with you. So what's the possible resolution? If you find that you don't have someone that's in a fiduciary capacity, or if you find that maybe it's a little bit unclear, documenting that your advisor acknowledges their fiduciary role. Really, that's what it comes down to. You want it in writing. Document it for me. And again, this is one of the questions in that questionnaire we're going to give you. It's just tell us, yes, we are in fact a fiduciary to your plan. Ask them to provide you with that information and with written recommendations on an ongoing basis. Now, before I get into more specifics of all the different documentation and some of the things that you want to ask for due diligence, let me provide a bit of an example. So everybody can see this very beautiful bridge. It has a very high bridge across a coastal view. This is actually in Big Sur in just near San Francisco, California. I actually personally had the opportunity to drive across this bridge at one point, and I think most people looking at this bridge, even though it's very high, you might be scared of heights regardless of the situation, wouldn't even think twice about driving across that bridge. No one listening to this would even think twice about it, probably going even, let's say, 35 miles an hour. Going across, maybe even sneak a peek at the view instead of the road ahead. Now, with that in mind, I don't think anyone has a problem driving across that bridge. Let me change the picture in just one way. So looking at this bridge now with no guardrails, how does everyone feel about driving across the bridge? And when we do this presentation live and we talk to plan sponsors, it usually gets a good laugh because forget about 35 miles per hour. Most people wouldn't want to drive across it at all. With that in mind, we ask people, how many times have you actually hit the guardrails when going across the bridge? The vast majority of those people listening would say never. So then why does it matter if the guardrails are there or not? Because it gives you a level of comfort to know that in the event something went wrong, whether it's a blown tire, a strong wind, or in the case of your retirement plan, a DOL audit or litigation, those guardrails are there to prevent things from going very badly. And that same kind of logic can be applied to professional responsibility for a retirement plan. You have those guardrails in place, fiduciary responsibility in place to make sure that if something goes wrong or if you have something come up, those guardrails are there to help protect you and help guide you in the right direction. So I talked briefly before about your advisor accepting their role as a fiduciary, but it really goes further than that, and we're talking about professional responsibility. Simply because your advisor commits to their role as a fiduciary does not necessarily mean that they will take professional responsibility for their actions. We encourage plan sponsors to take a closer look at their advisory agreements to determine if your advisor accepts the liability associated with their duties, if they protect you, and or if they limit your rights under ERISA. You want to ask your advisor if they take responsibility for their actions and to what degree. Terms like gross negligence are meant to protect the advisor, not the plan sponsor, and you really need to try and avoid those if you can. The reason being, gross negligence is pretty hard to prove, first of all, and it's very hard to prove as well without putting yourself also in hot water. Because if they were grossly negligent and just really intended to harm you, well, you should have known that that was happening because it's your job to provide due diligence and to ensure that they're doing something that's prudent for you and your retirement plan participants. So having terms like that, gross negligence, and there's a handful of others, are the types of things that are really meant to protect just the advisor, not meant to help you or protect you in any way. You also want to look and find out if there are third-party advisory solutions offered through your advisor or even just your record-keeping platform. These require direct due diligence, just like what we're covering here for your retirement plan advisors. And this can go through any of the variety of different things like financial engines and Morningstar and a lot of the different programs that kind of snap on with your record-keeping system or even a proprietary system with your advisor. You just want to make sure that if you have those kinds of third-party solutions, that they are in fact getting the same due diligence that you're providing for your advisor as a whole. So on the last slide, I talked about professional responsibility, and what that should really look like, and the things that you want to see in your agreements are a hold harmless for your retirement plan committee, the company, and its officers. This means that your advisor is willing to take responsibility for the services they're providing and will take first chair in defending the company if you're ever challenged. You want someone that's going to come out, step in front of you, and say, this is our responsibility, we're here to protect our plan sponsor. It also ensures that their attention and cooperation from the moment you voice your concern and hopefully prevents the development of an adversarial relationship. It's saying we're on the same side, we're both trying to push for the same direction, and we're here to protect our plan participants and to protect the company in the event that a participant wants to say we haven't done something that's in their best interest. So something else to avoid, just like we want to avoid things like gross negligence, you want to look through your agreement and make sure that they're not limiting you to arbitration. We found that many agreements have a provision that will limit dispute resolution to arbitration. But by limiting your recourse to arbitration, you're going to be seeking remedy from the advisor after the fact. In the event that action comes from a current or former employee, they are not going to be limited to arbitration. They can come after you with really everything that they've got. But if you're into a situation with your advisor, arbitration very well might be the right course of action to resolve things, but you don't want to be limited only to arbitration in the event that you need to go that direction. So this next section of the presentation deals with your advisor's risk management protocol, and it'll call out and detail if they maintain professional liability insurance specifically for ERISA, if they do have those conflicts of interest, their policy on solicitation, and what managed account solutions they may be providing. So let's look into each one of these in a little bit more detail. So professional liability insurance is specific to ERISA, and it's an important part of a retirement plan investment advisor's practice for a variety of reasons, even separate from those that most consider to be pretty obvious. Having insurance, obviously, it helps to bear a portion of the cost in the event of a dispute. Just like if you're going across the bridge with guardrails and you crash your car into the guardrails, you have insurance in order to cover a portion of that liability. This insurance is very much that same kind of thing. However, professional liability insurance is different than the typical E&O insurance or errors and omissions insurance that many are familiar with in our investment industry. E&O insurance covers obvious errors and omissions, things like you are moving from one fund to another and the money moves to the wrong investment option because of a clerical error, or you omit to make a change whenever you intended to make that change. That's an error, that's an omission. It's things that happen by accident or in the course of business, but it doesn't cover professional conduct or judgment, and that's what this is for. The most important aspect of professional liability insurance is that it will illustrate if your advisor has regularly had their practice and procedures scrutinized by a professional risk underwriter who focuses exclusively on matters involving ERISA. So they're looking into all the different pieces of this investment advisor's practice and making sure that all the pieces work together, and it's going to cover that professional conduct and judgment. Because if you say, or your advisor comes to you and says, you should remove Fund A and insert Fund B, there's no right or wrong answer there. Removing Fund A is not necessarily the right or wrong answer. It is a judgment call. It could 6 months later be the best investment that has ever lived over that next 6 months. So there's always a certain judgment aspect to going in and just acting what you feel at that time with the information you have is the best interest of your plan and its participants. But so when they look at all these different pieces and they really underwrite and look at the entire investment advisor's practice, the underwriter reviews the integration of that investment policy statement, documenting the steps involved in making recommendations, and continuity of the firm's fiduciary discipline. They also assess the risks involved in the nature of the firm's clients. Do they have clients that are kind of all over the map? Do they have a lot of different types of retirement plans? Is it all 401ks, or is it defined benefits and top hat plans and a lot of the different things that are offered out there in the marketplace? So they assess the risks involved in the nature of the firm's clients and how they all play together and how the firm itself is looking at those clients differently. The existence of professional liability coverage for investment advisory services provides evidence that risk underwriters who know what to look for have reviewed your advisor. So again, this is one of those questions where the reason that we ask that of an investment advisor is not just to make sure that they have insurance if things go wrong, but it's also to understand and make sure that someone who knows what to look for has gone through that practice and called out anything that may be of concern for you as a plan sponsor. Conflicts of interest are something that has become increasingly important, I think, to plan sponsors, and with the new Department of Labor ruling that expands the fiduciary standard, conflicts of interest are becoming even more important for plan sponsors to avoid. These include anything that could be perceived to influence the judgment of your advisor. While the SEC provides regulatory relief for advisors that disclose their conflicts of interest in writing, that's not the same thing on the ERISA side. The fiduciary standards for this practice on ERISA are very much different, and the interpretation by the Employee Benefit Security Administration, or the EBSA, which is the enforcement arm under the Department of Labor, is that disclosure is not a remedy for a conflict of interest when it comes to ERISA. They require that any potential conflict of interest be completely eliminated. And documenting potential conflicts, such as receiving a bonus for retaining business with a vendor or accepting reimbursement for things like due diligence travel, those can have unintended consequences. Basically, it can serve as evidence for the Department of Labor against you, the plan sponsor, for saying, yeah, we knew that we had a conflict of interest and we didn't take any action. So it's very important, and it's part of, again, this questionnaire that everybody's going to get to say, tell us, do you have any conflicts of interest, yes or no? If you have a conflict, we need to know exactly what that is because we need to make sure that we eliminate it. The worst thing that you can do is to document we know they have a conflict of interest and then take no action because someone can come back to you and say, clearly, here it is in writing, you knew they had a conflict, and yet you continued to operate under that conflict of interest. The next part is somewhat tied to conflicts of interest, but it goes to solicitation. And it pertains to advisors using the relationship with the plan to solicit plan participants for other financial services. This is a big part of that new DOL ruling to say solicitation of your employees for, let's say, things like a rollover to an IRA is going to be very strictly scrutinized and very really almost prohibited, and there can be prohibited transactions there. The reason being that let's say that you have a $50 million retirement plan and that participant is in your plan and they're getting the benefit of that pricing for having a nice sized retirement plan and again, not paying maybe what you would consider to be a retail fee. And then the advisor comes in and says, well, you should roll your money over here into this IRA. The participant does that, and when then they find that, well, my $100,000 balance that I rolled over into the IRA is not able to get that same fee structure as the plan. And that's a lot of what the rollovers and the conflicts of interest and solicitation piece of the new DOL ruling is trying to address. They want to make sure that if someone is out there and they're recommending something to a participant, that it is really in the best interest of that participant. So we really feel and have felt, we've done this presentation before in the past, even before the ruling, that this really should be viewed as a questionable practice if they're going to be soliciting other services from your employees, given the possibility that an employee can interpret that solicitation by the advisor as an endorsement of the advisor by you as a plan sponsor. Even if the services seem to be reasonable or beneficial, something could go wrong at any point. The participant can challenge the plan sponsor for what they perceived as an endorsement by you as a plan sponsor. So again, this has become increasingly important with the new definition of a fiduciary, and it expands the new rule who is in fact a fiduciary for your plan. So again, if you do have an advisor that is soliciting your employees for any other service, make sure that you understand what's going on, what those services are, and it may in fact expand your due diligence, because if they are offering other services, you're going to need to do due diligence on those other services as well in the event that a participant wants to challenge you saying that we thought that you were endorsing this other service. So managed account solutions, I talked a little bit about this earlier, but while these solutions may be worthwhile, the implications with respect to specialized reporting and fiduciary liability really do need to be understood by you as a plan sponsor. It's important to establish that your advisor understands their responsibility in documenting that a prudent fiduciary process has been followed for all investment decisions, whether it's directly from their firm or through a third-party solution they've recommended. So in other words, if your advisor has recommended that you use Financial Engines or Morningstar or any of these other types of managed solutions that are available through your record-keeping platform, you want to make sure, did you do the due diligence on it? Do you know what this third-party solution actually is, what it does, how it affects our employees? We had a senior-level C-suite executive at one of our clients that just by chance got two statements on the same day. They got one from their record keeper, and they got one from the managed account provider. This executive was not, in fact, in the managed account service, but it was they were soliciting to say, you know, we'd like to have you in the managed account service. We think we can help you. And there's been an increasing focus on that outcome, right? Participant outcomes and participant success. It's got a lot of different terms, but basically understanding how are you going to get to retirement? Are you going to have enough money once you get there? But what this executive was disturbed by was that using the same information, date of birth, account balance, salary, all the readily available information, they came up with two very different predictions. The one from the record keeper said, you're way behind, you may not have enough, you need to save more. And the one from the provider, the managed account provider, said, in fact, you can cut back your savings rate, change your investments this way, and you'll have more than enough once you hit retirement. And again, it's all based on what are the assumptions, what age are you going to retire, how long are you going to live. What's your savings rate? How do you expect your investments to grow? All those assumptions will have very different impacts on the outcome, and that message, again, even for an executive for this firm, caught that and was able to say, this just really doesn't jive. This really doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me of why I'd be getting different projections from what is essentially my one 401k account provider. So understanding those managed account solutions, really being able to dig into them and understand what are they doing for our employees, what are the fees, and is it providing, in fact, a good benefit for our employees in the long run. So fees. Fees should be an easy question to answer, but often the response can be a bit unclear. What are you paying? What are they making? Do they receive revenue from any outside sources in connection with your plan? Is everything disclosed on their 408B2 notice, or are there items that are not required to be disclosed? Again, these are all questions that you want to ask your advisors. They're questions that, frankly, you want to ask everybody that's involved with your plan, record keepers, advisors, TPAs, anyone else involved with your plan. You want to ask your advisor to provide a well-defined, easy to understand, and most importantly, transparent pricing schedule. Whenever possible, try to modify pricing schedules to eliminate variable compensation based on the investment options offered. And that point right there is something that is now going to be required under the new Department of Labor ruling. It's going to say you cannot get variable compensation depending on the investments that you use. In other words, if Fund A pays you 10 basis points and Fund B pays you 20 basis points, you can't have that decision. You can't go with Fund B because it pays you 20 basis points. You need to go, and the industry as a whole is moving towards explicit fee schedules. Again, the 3 points on the slide here, well-defined, easy to understand, transparent. This practice is referred to as fee neutrality. It removes any conflict of interest when the advisor is making investment recommendations. Again, you don't want to have someone that is getting variable compensation or who potentially is going to get one investment share class over another just because it'll change the way that they're paid. Those rules do not go into effect until next year, where the advisors that do receive variable comp are forced to comply with it. There are ways that you can get grandfathered or that you can kind of get exemptions, but again, asking explicit questions of your advisor and understanding how they get paid, what they get paid, why they get paid what they do, is really going to go a long way to understand, do we need to take action now to make sure that we have someone who's acting in our best interest, has an explicit fee, and again, hits these 3 bullet points that are up on the screen as it applies to fees. So the final section of due diligence refers to the documentation that your advisor should get for you on an annual basis for your internal due diligence files. And so this is a couple of different things. We've talked about some of it already, but the audited financials for your advisor's firm. This gives you insight to a couple of different things. Are they going to be able to meet their obligations? If you are using an advisor that is kind of that one-person shop and they're promising you that we are, in fact, a fiduciary, we agree to hold you harmless, depending on the size of your plan and the amount of revenue and how much risk they retain from that professional liability insurance, again, it gives you just a little bit of insight. Are they going to be able to meet the obligations, in fact, that they've put out there for you as your fiduciary, as your outside professional? It also gives you insight into various sources of income. Is this firm really in the retirement plan business? We have found a lot of investment advisors that they really are only in the retirement plan business so that they can get access to the private wealth side. The fees that you can charge on private wealth management, I'll tell you frankly, are much higher than what you can receive as an advisor for a retirement plan. And so a lot of folks will just do the retirement plan so they can get access to those C-suite folks or to those high balance or high earners where they can then hopefully get business on the other side of the fence. Again, the new ruling from the DOL is trying to sort some of that out to make sure that we're not having those conflicts, that we have people that really are committed. I think what we're going to find over the next 12 months as these new rules come into effect next year is going to be more consolidation. You're going to find a lot more folks that are specialists in the retirement plan market and not just the dabblers and the folks that have just maybe 1 or 2 plans, but really the firms that focus on really just solely the retirement plan market. Proof of professional liability insurance, we talked about that. What is it? Why is it important for you as a plan sponsor? But getting that proof of insurance, making sure that your plan name is on that due diligence, professional liability insurance certificate, it'll give you a lot of information about coverage, deductibles, provisions, just all the different pieces of the insurance, just like you would have for, again, your auto insurance, for what's your deductible, how much risk do you retain, and again, that'll go hand in hand with the audited financials. And then the last piece is something that every registered investment advisory firm is required to have. It's the SEC Form ADV Part 2A, much more commonly referred to now as the firm brochure. So what that does is it goes through and it really dissects their entire practice. What type of plans do they have? How do they charge their fees? How important is the ERISA business really to them? Do they have any regulatory concerns? Have they ever been sued? Have they ever been censured for any reason? Do they have any conflicts of interest? They all have to be explicitly stated in this document. So this is a good one-stop place to really review, understand your advisor's practice. Some of them are very long and can be a little bit difficult to read, but the good news about the firm brochure is that it is presented in a question and answer format, so it makes it a little bit easier to get through. And also, if you read it just one time, the way that they've structured these is you have to get a new one every single year, but if anything changes from one year to the next, so you have your 2015 firm brochure, and then you issue your 2016 brochure, if there's anything different in your new one, you have to put it right up front. And so it's actually, I think, even in front of the table of contents. So when you go and you get this from year to year, you don't have to read the whole thing again. You can just go to the front, look at the beginning, and say, has anything changed for our advisor since the last time we looked at this? And again, real quick evaluation, understand, is anything different? We also provide that questionnaire that, again, I keep referencing that we're going to send out a link to everybody for. We ask everyone to fill this out every year. Get your advisor to fill it out every year so you can confirm all these different questions we've talked about if anything has changed. Part of our practice at SWBC is, again, we proactively give those out to our clients every year just to make sure here you have the due diligence in the file. It's something easy to do, and you can just kind of file it away and move on. So the next part is really talking about the full RFP documentation. So the due diligence that I've been talking about going through, you can apply that to your existing advisor or even a prospective advisor. But if you want to go into a little bit more detail, really go into the full RFP. I'm sure everybody has done an RFP at some point or another, whether it's for record keeping or what have you. This will ask a lot more detailed questions about just how do they run their practice, how do they do the things they do. There's a handful of really high-level points that go into the different sections. So things like about your firm and team, who's the service team that's going to deal with us, how do you do your investment and participant services, how do you handle working with all the different providers that are out there, so the record-keeping provider that you might have for your plan. And then things like fiduciary status, fees, technology, and any security or business continuity. These usually run by the time we complete them for folks that send us a full RFP. It'll be about 25 to 30 pages maybe with answers and so forth. So they can get to be a little bit longer, but it does get into a lot more of the nitty-gritty specifics about how do you do what you do for your clients and how would you do it for us as a plan sponsor. This next page is, again, winding things up. This is the slide that I started with by saying asking your advisor to provide due diligence information annually, documenting all aspects of the relationship, getting those critical documents for your compliance files. Those two links that you see down on the bottom of this slide here are the links that I will send out to everybody that's on the call today, along with a copy of this presentation in a PDF so that you can go through and see all the different pieces. But those two links will take you directly to either the RFI questionnaire that I referenced frequently throughout the webinar. Very easy to download it. It's a PDF. And again, it's free. It doesn't have our branding or anything anywhere on it. And then there's the full RFP, which is actually a Word document, and that's so that you can edit it, delete questions, add questions, and you can send it out to prospective advisors where they can then just kind of fill in as they go and provide full RFP documentation for you. So with that, if there are any questions, we still have a little bit of time left here at the end. If there are any questions, please feel free to submit them at the bottom of your screen, and Kelly will kind of weed through them and let me know if there's any that we want to answer here live on the call.
We have gotten a couple in, Brad. First one is, if we had to ask our advisor one question about the recent DOL ruling, what should that be?
Well, and it's funny, we actually had that question at one of the recent conferences we did with you guys down in Orlando. And what we tell you is, go to your advisor and say, how do you feel about the recent DOL ruling? It's a very simple question, just to say, how do you feel about it? Because their answer will be very telling. If they are not in favor of the ruling, then you might want to ask them why. Because this rule really was created to protect retirement plan sponsors, to protect retirement plan investors and participants by making sure that that advisor is really acting in your best interest, in your participants' best interest. So ask them how they feel about it. If they're in favor of it, if they fully support it, then very likely they're going to be in a practice of being a fiduciary for you and having an explicit level fee structure. But just ask them that one question, just how do you feel about it, and I think their answer will tell you a lot.
Okay, thank you. Second question that we got in, how often should we perform due diligence or a full RFP?
So the due diligence definitely is something you want to get annually. Things can change pretty quickly in the marketplace and for your plan advisor and even for your individual plan. So getting that due diligence shouldn't be very hard. It shouldn't take you a lot of time. Some advisors, like I said, we send it out proactively to our clients every year. So getting it once a year, just the due diligence stuff, is very easy and quick to do. As far as doing a full RFP, one of two answers. You could say, oh, we'll do a full RFP maybe once every 5 years or more often if something changes. Or certainly if you have any concerns whatsoever with your current advisor, whether they're not providing the depth of services you need or they're not providing fiduciary protection that you need, then certainly step it up, do the full RFP. Most plan sponsors are aware, some are not, that switching advisors is not like going through a conversion. There's no big conversion from one provider to the next. Most plan participants don't even know, frankly, that the advisor exists unless they're out there doing employee education meetings. So yeah, if there's a service concern or anything around concerning your advisor, then certainly you'd want to do an RFP then.
Another question that just came in, does this apply to 321 or only 338 advisors?
And so that's actually a good question. And for everybody on the call's benefit, the difference between a 321 and a 338 investment advisor is a 321 investment advisor does not have discretion over the account, so they're considered non-discretionary. It basically means they come to you and say, our advice to you is that you should remove Fund A and replace it with Fund B. And it's up to you as a plan sponsor to say, yes, we want that to happen, or no, we don't want that to happen. So it's a non-discretion for 321. If you have a 338 investment advisor, that's you as a plan sponsor saying, we're giving the power to this advisor to make changes without consulting with us first. So hopefully that advisor will still communicate with you. There's still a requirement to communicate with your participants, but it would be more they come to you and say, Fund A is going to be replaced with Fund B. And as far as due diligence, it's very much for both. We have had a lot of plan sponsors ask us, well, which is better, having a 321 advisor or having a 338 investment advisor? And frankly, there's not any difference in terms of the type of protection that it provides you. 338 is not a premium service in terms of providing you additional fiduciary coverage. Anyone who tells you it's a premium service and is going to provide you a greater degree of fiduciary coverage, in our opinion, is probably just trying to charge a higher fee for it. In our practice, we don't charge anything different between 321 or 338. It's just a different kind of due diligence between the two. With 338, yes, you don't have to make the decision, but you still have to show that you've done due diligence on that advisor, that you're watching them, making sure that they are, in fact, taking care of the plan's investments and making changes as appropriate and following the process that they sold to you. Versus 321, it's kind of built in that if you have investment meetings and they're making recommendations and you're accepting those recommendations, that all kind of provides you another level of documentation ongoing. So it's very much required for both types of investment advisors.
Thank you. One other question came in. What are the red flags that we should avoid at this point?
So, and I touched on it a little bit as we went through. I think that a red flag for me would be an advisor who is going to try and take advantage of the contract exemption. So if someone comes to you and says, well, based on the new DOL ruling, we're going to take advantage of the best interest contract exemption, and that means this and that, because, again, basically what that comes down to is that that's a way to circumvent a rule that was designed to really protect you as a plan sponsor and your participants. I'm not saying that it's inherently evil and that people that do it are intentionally trying to harm you, but in our opinion, there are so many out there that are willing to be an RIA to you, a registered investment advisor, willing to be a fiduciary, willing to, without limit, act in your best interest, that a red flag for me would be someone that says they're going to try and take advantage of contract exemptions. And again, there's a lot of different types of products out there, but strictly as an advisor to your retirement plan, using the exemption would be a bit of a red flag.
Okay. Well, if there are any other questions, certainly feel free to contact Brad after the webinar or communicate with him. Again, Brad will be sending out the links to the documents that he's been referencing the whole webinar and also his slides. And we will be posting a recording of this webinar on our website, as well as sending you out a link to that and the continuing education information after the webinar, probably on tomorrow. If everyone wouldn't mind taking just a quick moment when we close the webinar, a quick 5-question survey will pop up on your screen. If you don't mind just letting us know, we love evaluations. So, Brad, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions that have come in at this time, so we certainly appreciate all of your information and insight, and thanks for a great webinar.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great afternoon. Thank you.